Movies are big business. They still are, just not as much. And that probably explains why we don't get video game adaptations of famous movies anymore. But back in the 90s, there were loads of them. And here is a selection of ones that I've reviewed probably over the last 5 to 6 years. So sit back, relax, or do whatever you want. You don't have to sit back and relax even. You can stand up and walk about. That's entirely up to you. But watch this. Alright? Thanks. Bye.
As an early teen, there was no bigger treat in the early to mid-90s than the trip to the video rental store at the weekend. Well, apart from when Mum went out and left the catalogue with all the ladies in their underwear in it. Sweet objectification. There was a whole cornucopia of cinematic joy to be found at the local video store, with well-known essential rental gems from Aliens to Tim Burton's Batman to RoboCop, but also lesser-known, lower-budget efforts like American Ninja, Maniac Cop and Delta Force 3. They were terrible, but as a teenager, you didn't care as long as someone got shot in the face. One movie that I never saw at the video shop was No Escape. Not only did I never see it at the video shop, but up until I started doing this series, I'd never even heard of it. I'm by no means Mark Kermode in my cinematic knowledge, but I worked at an HMV for over 10 years and was thought of as the movie guy. Well, that or Ugly McBumface. But generally, my knowledge of movies and obscure movies of that was pretty good. So it came as a little bit of a surprise when I found this Super Nintendo game with Ray Liotta on the front. No Escape was a 1994 movie released by Columbia Pictures. The movie made a dismal $15 million return on a $20 million budget. The movie stars a bunch of actors whose Hollywood handprints are probably tucked away down dingy alleyways or near public toilets in Hollywood. Lance Henriksen, Kevin Dillon, and this guy all feature with Goodfellas star Ray Liotta in the lead role of Captain J.T. Robbins. The synopsis is that Robbins is sent to prison for killing his superior officer in the year 2022. The corrupt corporate prison grinds down on Robbins, who decides to rebel, and he gets rewarded for his efforts with a transfer to Absalom, an isolated incarceration island filled with the very scummiest of the world's lawbreakers, all left to their own devices. Two rival factions, the Outsiders and the Insiders, hustle and bustle for power in this seemingly escapable hell on earth, but Robbins is determined to escape. The movie got average ratings across the board, attaining a low 50% Rotten Tomatoes aggregate and a 2-star rating from famous movie critic Roger Ebert. At the time of the movie's release in 1994, Roger Ebert said, "Little thought has been given to the personalities of the characters, nor is the big picture fully explained." Ebert went on to criticise the movie's lack of logic and lackadaisical attention to detail. So overall, the movie appeared to be very average, and of course we know now that it tanked. But the idea of a Marine trying to survive and indeed escape from a prison island, well, that's not a bad idea or concept for a video game. Sony Entertainment somehow ended up with the game license, and they promptly handed coding duties to Liverpool's most historic developer, the mighty Psygnosis. Psygnosis decided to make a game that looks quite familiar in both its animation and its setting. Yes, No Escape is a tribute band flashback, from the jungle platforming to the rotoscoped animation. However, I doubt very much that Ray Liotta himself was covered in tennis balls. Even the main sprite, with the lack of facial detail, has elements of flashback to it. But this might not be intentional. It could just be that the sprite, along with the rest of the graphics, are just plain sloppy. The rotoscoping isn't overly smooth, and the backgrounds are poorly rendered. They end up looking like brown and green blobs that are masquerading as fauna. Unfortunately, the gameplay isn't much better. The platforming is very hit, but mainly extremely miss, which is compounded by the bottom of each stage being an insta-kill pit. You can retaliate against the enemy prisoners' attacks, initially with some pretty ineffectual punches and kicks that have a poor range. They're ineffectual not due to the initial enemies being tough nuts, but because they respawn quicker than a frog with access to Viagra and a porn account. Your best move early on is to just peg it through the entire level, ignoring your pursuers. Good gameplay design, this is not. You'll encounter the occasional boss, and so begins a war of attrition as you frantically hammer away at the attack button, hoping he dies before you do. Later on, you can unlock more weapons and equipment, although it's rough to figure out what you're picking up sometimes. What is that? There's an occasional puzzle, usually involving switches, but they're let down a bit by the controls and those infuriating missed platform jumps. It really is very hard to judge the edge of a platform, and sometimes you'll just go straight through it. No Escape is to Delphine's seminal classic platformer Flashback what this dead parent's hero costume is to the one worn by Christian Bale in The Dark Knight. A cheap knockoff that is obviously of poor quality and probably a little bit flammable, and girls will laugh at you, and it smells of chemicals and tears easy, and you'll only wear it once and makes you forget how to do analogies. Not only was No Escape saddled by the fact it was attached to a film that no one really knew or cared about, unfortunately it also came out at the end of the 16-bit machine's life cycle. No Escape didn't garner too many reviews I could locate online. At this point, a lot of magazines were focusing more on PlayStations and Sega Saturns, though I did find a review in an old GamePro magazine that must have mistaken the 7 key on their keyboard for a 1 or a 2 and gave the very dismal No Escape a very generous 7 out of 10 score. If No Escape the movie hadn't been a flop, then may I suggest that Ray Liotta's Robbins had been recaptured for a sequel. The villainous wardens could have placed him in an empty room with just a Super Nintendo or a Sega Megadrive, a CRT and a copy of this abomination to keep him company for the duration of his sentence. What a scary thought that would be. Okay, thanks, bye! Pirates. Not the Somali ones, or that man trying to sell you a copy of Troy on a DVD-R in Wetherspoons in 2004. Oh no, not them. But of course the ones named after their beard colours. People like Redbeard, Blackbeard, and crikey, Pirates' mothers had amazing foresight to call them that. Almost certainly the only occupation where you can swashbuckle. Have you ever heard of a swashbuckling Subway sandwich artist, perhaps, or a NHS ward coordinator that swashes buckles as he or she coordinates the living shinola out of that proctology ward? No, you haven't. They don't swashbuckle. It's literally only pirates. All of this, though, seems to come at a cost, though, as they're almost certain to lose a limb or an eye or develop a West Country accent. At least this is all stuff that the movies have told me.
Movies, of course, like Cutthroat Island. Cutthroat Island features Gina Davis as pirate Morgan Adams as she hunts down map pieces from her scurvy, treacherous uncles, whereupon, of course, she can locate a huge stash of gold on the eponymous Cutthroat Island. Along the way, she meets conman William Shaw, played by Matthew Modine, and they set out to capture the bounty on this high seas comedic adventure. Note to pirates, hide more stuff on the low seas. No pirates seem to look on the low seas. It's always the high seas where all the adventuring and the treasure hunting occurs. Alternatively, rather than the low seas, if you're a pirate in 1995, you could always hide your treasure on the seats of cinemas showing Cutthroat Island. There's a joke about its audience numbers. You see, Cutthroat Island wasn't just a flop, it was possibly the biggest flop in cinema history, with losses of $147 million. It ended up wiping out studio Coralico Pictures, who just a few years earlier had put out movies such as the original 3 Rambos, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, and goddamn Terminator 2 Judgment Day. The troubled and chaotic production was beset by issues from the get-go. Michael Douglas was originally cast as William Shaw, but wanted the film to fit with his schedule, and his role expanded so he was equal to Gina Davis. Something unlikely to happen, given that Davis was married to director Rennie Harlin. Davis, at this point, had only been cast in light comedies, but after her dramatic turn in Thelma and Louise, there was a feeling that maybe she could lead a pirate action movie, which of course really doesn't make any sense, but what the hell, wifey gets what she wants, doesn't she, Rennie? Oliver Reed originally had a cameo, but got fired after fighting in a bar and whacking out his Johnson in front of poor old Gina Davis. Oh, Oliver, you naughty cad. Other issues included a crew strike, sewage pipes exploding into a water tank that the actors were supposed to swim in, Harlin having to spend $1 million of his own money on script rewrite as Coralico continued to struggle, and worst of all, money was so tight that the actors themselves had to film their own stunts. Reviews were poor, the budget was spiralling out of control, and it ended up debuting at a very lowly 13th place in the US box office. It killed Coralico, Davis's career as a lead, and the pirate genre itself, until of course Johnny Depp sashayed onto the Black Pearl's poop deck, I love that word, in 2003. None of this bodes overly well for Acclaim and their Cutthroat Island game, which was released the same year. Developed by Software Creations, Cutthroat Island was released on the Game Boy, the Game Gear, the Megadrive and the Super Nintendo. Players can select between film leads Morgan Adams or William Shaw, or both if you've got a scurvy swab pal who fancies yarging their way through 10 levels of Final Fight but with swords beat-em-up action. You can select whether you want to swashbuckle, i.e. twat him about with a sword, or brawl, or give him what for with your fist and bits you find on the floor. There are other levels too, like platforming sections and a minecart level, because, it's 1990s gameplay, and it was punishable by law if your game didn't either feature some sort of ice or a minecart stage. Seriously, there's even a minecart level in FIFA 94 if you get to the World Cup final as Qatar. That's a lie. It looks okayish, though Shaw's standing animation seems a little bit incongruous with the rest of the tone of the game. You're a pirate, mate. You're not Bruce Lee. Stop it. The backgrounds too are fairly underwhelming for a later day 16-bit title. The characters themselves are stylised but under-detailed. Why have you got no face, Gina Davis? As such, the look doesn't really work, and the game doesn't look much different from a Master System game. The music is fine, actually. It's nice work, Software Creations there. You can have a biscuit for that.
The game itself is playable when compared to sort of lower rent scrolling beat 'em ups of the time, games like Growl or like Combat Tribe, say, and the sword play mode is actually quite innovative. However, overall, Cutthroat Island isn't fit to lace the shoes of titles like Final Fight or Streets of Rage 2. New moves are unlockable, which adds some variety, but the ideas, as grand as they are, aren't implemented with the finesse that they deserve, standard with a rushed movie license. In addition to its issues, the game's sticking to the movie storyline sees the amount of levels truncated, so the game is very short. Reviews of the time were quite mixed, but mainly average to poor, with Mean Machines giving the Megadrive version a very stinky 14 out of 100. Crikey, you don't see scores that low that often. Coming out just as the 16-bit era was kicking off and tied to a poorly received and performing movie, Cutthroat Island sold poorly as well, and everyone's timbers remained utterly stationary, and not one bit of timber shivering happened. That's a joke about shiver me timbers.
We're in the 16-bit era today for a battle of sorcery on the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. But the question is this: is this game based on a flop movie simply Wizard? Or is it a load of old Warlocks? A cinematic puzzler in the style of Flashback and released by LJN on the Super Nintendo and Acclaim on the Mega Drive in 1994, Warlock was based on the 1991 Supernatural movie that went on to have several sequels. But wait, how can a film be considered a flop and yet still get sequels? Who in the bloomin' hell do I think I am, calling this movie franchise starter a flop? Am I Sir Clive the Wrong? Am I having a stroke? What's going on here? No, let's just have a look, right, and see where I'm right, because the movie and its development might hold some secrets here. You see, while Warlock was actually a success for Trimark Pictures, the distributor company that owned the rights to the movie at the time of its release, well, they didn't actually make the movie, as they acquired the film for peanuts after original production company New World Pictures found themselves in financial shtuck in the late 1980s. The film itself, you see, was made in 1988 and put together for the sum of $15 million, which is small fry for movies, especially these days. However, the film had been sat on the shelves for those 2 years, and eventually it was purchased by this modest little movie house Trimark in the sort of movie equivalent of that yellow sticker clearance bit in the fridge in Tesco. And from that, they made their money back and more. It made $9 million back. Well, that was boring. Let's stop talking about financial successes of films and start talking about their content instead. The idea is that in the year 1691, quite a long time ago, as I'm sure you'll agree, the evil, villainous, devil-worshipping Warlock has been nabbed by Witchfinder Redfern. And in an interesting twist, Witchfinders aren't the sociopathic, puritanical dickheads they normally are in films, and indeed were in real life. But in this case, they were totes McGroats, completely correct, and that Warlock fella needs to be brought to some sort of final justice. We know this because just as they're about to execute the Warlock, Satan himself appears and sends Mr. W-Lock far into the future. Now, if that doesn't implicate you, if you're hanging around with Satan, then I don't know what does. Redfern then decides that he's having none of that, and he jumps through the portal too, with the pair eventually ending up in the world of global hypercolour t-shirts that is the late 1980s. The Warlock has been tasked by his
friendly neighbourhood Satan to get the Grimure back, which is an ancient spellbook, with the eventual devilish aim to undo creation entirely. Redfern teams up with a young lady called Cassandra to put an end to this nonsense, and we get a very low budget mix of a time reversed Terminator and Highlander as a result. What's not to like? The film, I guess? I'm being unfair. It's fine. It looks decidedly cheap 30 years on. By no means a classic, but it's entertaining fare. Julian Sands is the eponymous Warlock, and he's suitably hammy and creepy, and Cassandra is played by Laurie Singer, who apparently was a bit of a pain in the director's bum and refused to wear a lot of the prosthetics that would have made her character age in accordance with the curse placed on her by the Warlock. And look who it is. It's bloody Withnail himself, Richard E. Grant, playing the time-travelling Redfern. And look at his lovely, gloriously ridiculous mane. So we know the movie was a moderate success at its second attempt. However, it did have tragic consequences for one poor boy. You see, the movie's occult aspects were part of a murder court case in 1995 when 14-year-old Sandy Charles and his unnamed 8-year-old accomplice, Jesus Christ, murdered 7-year-old Jonathan Timpson in Saskatchewan, Canada, bringing forth a video nasties debate that was pretty similar to that one we had after the murder of Jamie Bolger. I think you'll remember the movie in question that time was Child's Play 2. Sandy Charles was allegedly completely obsessed with the movie Warlock and heard voices in his head instructing him to kill somebody. Let's move on to the game. Warlock the game was developed by Real Time Associates and, as previously mentioned, released on both the Megadrive and Super Nintendo in 1994, with a Jaguar version planned but quickly binned when the Jaguar proved to be as popular as a Jimmy Savile statue in a nursery. A side-scrolling wizard-based shooter casting you as a nameless druid. Yes, sadly you do not get to play as Richard E. Grant. I can't think of a game where you do get to play as Richard E. Grant. Maybe we should all make a game where you get to play as Richard E. Grant. Having said that, he does have the long, lank mullet, and as early 90s as Ricicles with Marshmallows in Edgelord Trenchcoat. So you could pretend you're playing as Withnail.
Yes, we'll buy this place, and we'll install a fucking jukebox in here. And I have all you stiffs up a bit.
Your job is to prevent the Warlock from gathering 6 ancient runestones, with which he and his boss can leave the entire world in the same state as a family home the day after a teenager has had a house party there. In other words, completely in ruins. Luckily, our hairy-necked gentleman hero is an ancestor of ancient magicians and can use 7 different spells in order to thwart the craven, satanic, destructive desires of the villainous Warlock. The Warlock will attempt to put a dampener on your contrarian efforts by throwing all manner of altered humans, demons, evil druids and wicked curses upon you. The animation is that post Another World Prince of Persia rotoscope smoothness, or at least an attempt at it, and overall graphically it's fine, if at times a bit Euro platformy in its look. The Super Nintendo version, I would say, shades the Mega Drive version, but Sega gets the last laugh as they get all that post Mortal Kombat gore and blood that obviously Nintendo weren't touching with anyone's barge pole. With that said, the Nintendo game doesn't completely get rid of the gore. Look at that health bar. What does that remind you of? I'll tell you what it reminds me of. Gameplay is sadly a bit bland, if anything, and the controls, well, they're very slow at responding. That rotoscope style graphic work has left the game very sluggish to play, with the character going through a series of animations before he'll actually turn around. It's a bit annoying. Most of the levels are pretty straightforward left to right affairs as well, so there's not much to keep you going there. It's all very bland, very grey wallpaper. It is a difficult game with relentless attacks from various underworldian denizens, but I couldn't say I was overly keen to overcome the steep learning curve. Another semi-interesting feature is in the Megadrive version, if you put in the password ping-p on the options screen, you get to play a version of Pong where you control two wizards. Yes, Pong, but with wizards. It is what it is. There are worse games on both systems, but at least with bad games like BB's Kids or Batman Forever, well, at least they are memorably bad. Warlock is as exciting as a crest sandwich, and it really does cast a spell of absolute boredom upon anyone that dares play it, and there's no charm to prevent you instantly forgetting the incredibly tepid experience the next day. And that's a huge shame, because it is an exciting concept, the idea of wizards running around in a sort of modern environment, but there's just no magic to be found here. Make no mistake about it, a city would be a pretty bad place to keep a dinosaur. They need plenty of room to gallop, to roar, and of course to eat Dennis Nedry. Cities are generally filthy enough, without mountains of Bronto turds to walk around. So yes, dinos and cities don't work. But what happens if you add to those dinos and cities the element of 16-bit Nintendo games consoles? Ooh, let's have a look. Well, it's certainly better than Dino Cities and movie theatres, because Dino City didn't even make it to the cinema. It was a TV movie known as Adventures in Dinosaur City, or elsewhere, Dinosaurs the Movie, which, much like the Japanese TV movie Tasmania's Story, which I covered a few months ago, was destined only to appear on television. Dinosaurs seemed to be big business in the early 1990s, what with that Jurassic Park movie coming out to leave a big old Stegosaurus footprint in your local picture house. But Dino City actually plopped onto television screens a bit earlier than that, with it first appearing in late 1991. The plot involves a trio of teens getting well into a TV show about anthropomorphic dinosaurs. You know, just like the Jim Henson show, Dinosaurs. Not the mama! Incidentally, the dinosaurs in this movie were designed by John Criswell, who worked on that show. There's a link. Anyway, these kids decided to watch it on an even bigger telly, which just so happens to be in their scientist father's laboratory, and isn't a telly, but a time machine. Uh-oh, Spaghetti-O. Yes, this obviously leads them to getting sucked into the television show, because science neither makes sense and is always our enemy. At least that's what that man with the placard in central London told me. There they meet three dinosaurs, Forry, Rex and Tops, who just happen to be freedom fighters. Freedom fighters locked in a struggle against the creatively titled bad guy, Mr. Big, and his cavemen henchmen, the Rockies. What utter hookum. And it's obviously a very 90s movie. I mean, just look at that cover. Such tood. 90s tood for days. Dino City is definitely riding the coattails of Dino Mania, joining the ranks of subpar dinosaur adventures like Theodore Rex and Tammy and the T-Rex. Adventures in Dinosaur City has an audience score of a lowly 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it can be purchased on DVD, and you can also view it in its entirety on YouTube at the time of recording of this video if you wanted to waste about an hour and a half watching a crap film about dinosaurs wearing leather jackets. Now, for some reason, someone at IREM, that legendary software house behind the mighty R-Type, they heard about this completely unremarkable TV movie, and they decided that it was the perfect franchise to hitch a platformer onto. Clearly the best way to steal sales off of Nintendo and the most famous game character of all time, and arguably his greatest 2D adventure, is a ropey Disney Channel movie with a production budget that might or might not have paid for that Triceratops dump that we saw in Jurassic Park. It's hard to tell. Not a great idea, IRM, but you do you. You're given a choice of two teams at the beginning of the game. Humans, Timmy and Jamie, are paired with Rex and Tops respectively, as they battle both the Rockies and try to locate the time machine fuse that they need to return them back to Science Dad's lab. The game seems almost incredibly difficult at first, until you figure out this one simple trick. Do not pick Timmy and the Rex. Picking Rex is akin to putting the game into a game of Dark Souls-esque difficulty. His punches are weak, and of course they're very short because he's a T-Rex and they got little arms. Needless to say, you should pick Jamie and Tops, who has a ranged attack of hurling sharpened flints. Much more useful. It's a curiously bizarre piece of unbalanced gameplay that honestly leaves me completely baffled. Seriously, Rex's punch has the hit detection of a budgie feather stroking lightly a buffalo scrotum. You can leap on opponents too, but Tops definitely has a large advantage in gameplay. Always pick Tops. Gameplay is a very standard platformer, but it's a very competent one too, particularly for an early Super Nintendo effort. The usual gamut of 16-bit platformer levels are here. You've got an ice level, a jungle level, a cave level, and technology levels all feature. There's even a bit on a cart, because why wouldn't there be? Well, it's more of a roller coaster, but it's the same sort of thing. The humans aren't just dinosaur shoulder dressings either. They can be used to solve puzzles and to access collectibles by leaping off the back of their scaly rides and stretching their pubescent legs. Ew! Pubescent legs? Get some feet on that, love. It sort of plays a bit like the platform bits of NES classics Blaster Master, with less tanks and more dinosaurs. Graphically, it's not too flashy, but it's not as ugly as some of the US platform releases that would come out later. It's cute, but it doesn't look a lot like the movie, like at all. There's not a great deal of crossover between the movie and the game, barring the plot and the lead characters. Control is fine, a little sticky to get used to initially, and you've got 3 hearts and a tricky time limit in which to clear the levels, and overall, it's a decent challenge. I don't mind Dino City at all really, it's perfectly playable, if a little bit unremarkable. EGM gave the game a 7 out of 10 and said Dino City is another excellent title that seems geared for kids, but adults can play too. You've got thumbs, adults, bloody get on with it. Enforce liked it. It got an 81 from them, and a review that concluded that as arcade action games go, Dinosaurs isn't too bad, but it could have done with being a bit tougher. Overall, it's quite fun, with lots of colourful sprites, background, and picnics. Picnics? Yum! So yes, Dino City. It's not as dino poor as the movie. In fact, I think it's quite Triceratops. That's it. What's more troublesome than one ninja? Well, 3 ninjas. Luckily, they're teenagers though, eh? They won't be doing any assassinations, I can assure you of that. They'll be croaking about how unfair their parents are, they'll be slouching about, and they'll be being loud on the bus in an attempt to impress girls who say, "Oh my god," way too much. So what's all this about then, this 3 ninjas kick back? Well, 3 Ninjas was an American martial arts comedy movie for 90s children that did well enough to get 3 movie sequels. That's pretty well indeed. The original was released by Touchstone, with the subsequent sequels coming via TriStar.
What number was the movie stroke game we're talking about today then? Well, in keeping with the title of the franchise, it's 3. You've got 3 Ninjas from 1992, 3 Ninjas Knuckle Up from 1993, 1994 brought us this, 3 Ninjas Kick Back, and then 1998 presented
The terrifying sight of Hulk Hogan in a wig.
And it gave us 3 Ninjas High Noon on Mega Mountain. The last one, to me, sounds more like a video game, but it didn't get one, and neither did 1 nor 2. Confusingly, Kickback actually came out second out of the 3, with 2 of the 3 kid actors replaced. But it's actually the 3rd of the series, as the first 2 were filmed back to back, but distribution problems delayed the second movie's release by an entire 2 years. Meaning that the 2 original characters returned if you saw them in the order they were released. Very strange, and what a mess. The recognisable face of the movie franchise is unquestionably the great Victor Wong, who was probably in at least one of your favourite movies growing up. He's one of those performers that is uncharitably described as a character actor, which to me is the basis of that term is that he's not classically handsome, as he's old and has different sized eyes. Poor old Victor. 3 Ninjas Kick Back sees the eponymous trio travel to Japan to try and secure an ancient dagger, which is also a key to untold fortune, because MacGuffins were an easy script writing trope for the 90s kids movies, as were comedy pratfalling goons, post Home Alone trap setting horseplay, and cool ass 90s attitude, all of which are present here and are just as tiresome and irritating as you remember them being. You see this trailer here and how 90s low budget throwaway kids movie it looks? It's exactly how you'd expect it to be. Aside from the movie deciding to end not in a climactic fight in Japan, but a minor league baseball game, a truly bizarre ending to a kung fu movie. Reviews of 3 Ninjas Kick Back were as brutal as a roundhouse to the jaw. A 15% aggregate score on Rotten Tomatoes tells you half the tale, with the completed tale coming from its box office takings, which returned just $11,798,000 from a $20 million budget domestically. It wasn't meant to shinobi for 3 Ninjas, at least in the cinema. But what about that? They're the video game of it. Sony ImageSoft put out 3 Ninjas Kick Back in 1995 on the Super Nintendo and the Mega CD, one of their last releases before Sony rolled out the PS1 and never looked back at these sort of low-budget movie license games on the 16-bit formats. The Mega CD version came in a 2-pack with the completely unrelated movie adaptation Hook, strangely enough. That's a bizarre combo. Mega CD even features overlays of Mr. Wong appearing and giving you advice, and look at them in all that horrible, bitty little Sega CD glory. The Megadrive version was actually published by Psygnosis, but all the versions were very similar because they were all developed by one company, that company being Malibu Interactive. Malibu Interactive were an offshoot company of the Malibu Comics line, the 3rd biggest publisher of said material in the 1990s, making comics of properties such as Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter and the Terminator series, in addition to its Ultraverse superhero titles. Malibu Interactive also made games based on Cliffhanger, Smurfs and the Sega versions of Batman Returns before they eventually folded in 1995. 3 Ninjas Kick Back was a side-scrolling platformer, the sort of standard movie license genre choice that we had come to expect in the 16-bit era. You choose which of the irritating teens you want to play as at the beginning, and you'll have to get used to them forevermore as you can't reselect your character after that point.
Other than their weapons, there's not much difference despite their height and colours. Rocky has a bow staff like Donatello, Colt has a katana like Leonardo, and pint-sized Tum Tum wields a pair of twin sai like Raphael. Sorry, Michelangelo, there's no child version of you. Ninjas and wild beasts stand between your young martial artists and the magical dagger over the course of 5 levels. Each of the 5 levels are broken into different stages, all of which have varying lengths. Some are over in the blink of an eye, while some drag on like a complete Emmerdale box set. There's a surprising twist here. It plays okay for the most part. The controls are generally alright, apart from the slightly clunky mechanics involving platforms above you and rope swinging. It's a struggle to get used to them initially, but you'll have to adapt, bucko. One thing you may struggle with, though, is the difficulty. 3 Ninjas Kick Back, a game aimed, remember, at the movie fan base of pre-teens, is ridiculously difficult on some stages. The caverns, for example, are only finishable via trial and error, as erratic spikes, vanishing platforms and barely visible fire plumes pop out of nowhere and either cut off or scorch off your character's nascent pubic hair before it's even had a chance to cover and spread his scrotum for the first time. Enemies also appear using all sorts of ninjiggery-pokery and cause you no end of issues. Eventually I got bored with dying repeatedly and utilised the infinite lives cheat, but still struggle with progress at times, be it hammering away at this overweight nurse's breasts in an effort to fella, or the energy-sapping excesses of the Japanese forest and its endless procession of Nippon nasties. Your attacks are weak too, which doesn't help with the gameplay. The main goons take an utter pounding from your rather short-ranged weaponry. I mean, they are only teenagers, I suppose. And so while you're assured of longevity with 3 Ninjas Kick Back, it's not going to be a fun time. Frustrating isn't the word. It's graphically alright, nothing overly flashy or creative, but as far as Western platformers go on the 16-bit consoles, it's fine. The tiny sprites are nicely drawn and smoothly animated, and the environments, while a little inconsistent in quality, deserve to have their picture in the dictionary next to the word adequate. Sound is less impressive, the music is poor, and the kids must have had a dissension in the old testicular region given their gruff, damaged yelps. The Sega CD version does have the film's score as part of its soundtrack though, and that sounds perfectly nice. 3 Ninjas never kicked back with another title, which should come as no surprise at all. It's fine, but it's more difficult than passing a serrated bread knife. GamePro said in their March 1995 issue that fans of the film might like it, but others should avoid these new ninja kids on the block. They gave it a 5 out of 10. And you know what, that's about right, to be fair. It's as middle of the road as a Coldplay concert. Let's kick butt. Let's not. So who is your favourite judge? Is it Judy? Is it Rinda? Or is it Reinhold? Well, none of them are in this. I'll tell you who is. Sylvester Stallone. Him off of the Rocky. I am the law. Judge Dredd was a 1995 movie based on the titular character from the British Beano for Edgy Boys comic known as 2000 AD. 2000 AD? I bet in 1977 when that first came out, they must have thought it seemed really futuristic and far away. Well, it wasn't, was it, you idiots? It was only like 23 years or something. God damn it, you bloody fools. Still going though. Judge Joseph Dredd first put on his jackboots and fascistically walked around, but in a heroic way, in the post-apocalyptic dystopian streets of Megacity 1 in the second issue of 2000 AD, and swiftly became the comic's most popular and enduring character. Dredd was part of a You know what, instead of me whittering on, why don't you just read this intro from the game? I mean, you're here to watch the game anyway. I'll go and make a glass of squash or something. Do you want anything? Ribena? No, I'm not making a tea. I don't want to make a tea. People are too specific regarding tea, and if you make it slightly not to their specifications, they get all moody. Do you know what? Most Americans don't even have a kettle. Isn't that... Oh, it's done. Looks like I'm not going to get my squash. So that little tech spiel is ultimately the synopsis to Judge Dredd boiled down, and it is that tale that caught Buena Vista's eye enough for them to go and buy the rights to make a ruddy film of. After considering old Arnie, Sylvester Stallone was eventually cast to play the moody jawline of Judge Dredd, and he was accompanied by Diane Lane, Max von Sydow, a scenery-chewing performance from arch-villain and wronged genetic twin Armand Assante, and goofball Rob Schneider in the annoying comedy sidekick role that was an absolute requirement in most late 20th century action movie guff. The movie centres around Dredd trying to clear his name after being falsely convicted of a crime and exiled to the ruined wilds outside the city. Judge Dredd was lambasted by the critics and fans of the comic alike. Director Danny Cannon was said to be utterly disheartened when his violent R-rated movie was hacked to bits to first get an NC-17 rating and then again by Buena Vista to get the teen money-making rating of the PG-13. They butchered all the butchering, so they did. They did all this so that kids could sit and kick you in the back of your chair and chat and giggle throughout the whole movie just because they're trying to impress the members of the opposite sex that they brought with them. You're too young to indulge in carnal pleasures, you dickheads. You wouldn't even know what to do, and I'm trying to watch this subpar futuristic action movie, so shut up and bog off. Another criticism came from the amount of times Dredd removes his helmet in the movie, a thing he absolutely never did in his 18-year comic book existence before this movie came out. Stallone does it here constantly, probably due to studio interference, because why hire a bankable big-name star if you're not going to have their face all over the movie? Having a look at the Rotten Tomatoes aggregate score, we're right in the 20s here, from over 50 reviewers. Dredd was seen as a flop with a poor US domestic box office and a slightly better international ticket sale, nudging it just about into a feeble $113.5 million return from a $90 million budget. That sounds a lot, doesn't it? $23 million? Well, it's not. I mean, I'd like it, but apparently that's bad for a film of this nature. As you're probably no doubt aware, there was a better interpretation of Dredd that came out in 2012 starring Karl Urban. However, you probably didn't go and see it, so no one's going to make a sequel of it, and that means, ironically, there's no justice. Judge Dredd, the video game, was published the same year as the movie by Acclaim on the PC, the Megadrive, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy and the Game Gear. All the games played in a very similar manner, although hardware limitations obviously apply in some instances, seeing a stripped down version of the game, particularly on the handhelds. The development team behind the scenes were Probe Software, the former 8-bit computer technical marvels who regularly teamed up with Acclaim to great effect on the 16-bits with titles like Alien 3 and to absolutely miserable effect with Batman Forever. The good news in this instance is that Judge Dredd is a very similar game to Alien 3 in terms of its feel and its engine, because no one wants to deal with the abject lunacy that is that Batman Forever game with its terrible control scheme and platformer crossed with Mortal Kombat Chimera that was absolutely abysmal. The multiple directional ladder packed run and shooter loosely follows the movie's plot, but also adds, at the end of the game, a terrifyingly grim extra-dimensional menace in the form of the Dark Judges. This will no doubt give poor old Sylvester a torrid old time. Poor love. Of the 12 levels in the game, 7 of them are digitised replicas of the movie sets, with the remaining 5 taking their inspiration from the comics. In each stage, Dredd is given objectives that mainly involve blowing things up, arresting or killing folk, which is exactly the sort of procedural police work that you'd want from a Judge Dredd licence. There's a range of bullets that can be loaded into Dredd's iconic Lawgiver gun, a handheld revolver of many talents. Well, shooting mainly. The perps of Mega City 1 need to be careful not to end the day on the explodey end of one of Dredd's many bullets, ranging from heat seekers, incendiary bullets and ricochet bullets that bounce around like billy-o and can even do damage to your big old lunkhead. Failing that, you can just do enough damage to a wrongdoer to ensure that they acquiesce to their severe punishment, and they get bundled off onto a little disc and sent to prison. A relief, I'm sure, for all the grannies around Mega City 1 who don't want their handbags snatched. While most wrongdoers will acquiesce, the odd fella seems to have an unusual gait about them, and this is because they're one of the 4 dark judges who've taken up residence in their body, pushing the poor fella's soul out. Once vaporised, the tormented gent will be free to die on the ground, while the dark judge's demonic form escapes to find another host. These ghastly possessions can be temporarily stopped with the correct bullet from our good friend Joseph Dredd. Dredd, despite his heavy armour, is an agile chap indeed, and he can scurry up ladders, vault great distances and swing like a big old gibbon across overhangs. Animation is fairly smooth and the control is pretty fluid. It's almost certainly using the same engine as Alien 3, which in itself was one of the very best Western produced platformers on the 16-bit consoles. Is Judge Dredd as good as 1993's Alien 3? I'm not sure on that at all. There's a bit more to it, certainly in terms of what's actually happening in the game. There's obviously a bit more variety in the backgrounds and the enemies, which should be obvious given the fact that that game was all prison walls and phallic-headed xenomorphs. It's just that Judge Dredd isn't as fun. There's some very difficult boss encounters, an uneven and taxing difficulty, some very of the era annoying platforming sections involving floating platforms, and ultimately it's just not quite as strong as its stablemate. With that said, it's still a pretty good game, and if you like that game, you'll probably like this too, maybe just not as much. The 8-bit handheld versions are surprisingly strong too, with the Game Gear version probably the better of the two, though the Super Nintendo has the slight edge on the Megadrive one, meaning it's pretty even Stevens there between Nintendo and Sega. There's me sitting on the fence again. CMVG had a lot of time for old Judge Dredd. They said that it's a pretty ace game, atmospheric, challenging, and even a wee bit original. It should keep most people happy, even if the action does lag at some points. They gave the Super Nintendo game an 88 and the Mega Drive one an 86. Mean Machines gave the Mega Drive version an 80% and said Dredd is very playable and a big old platformer to boot. More originality would be nice. Bit of disagreement in EMAP Towers there then. GameFan went with a 79 for the Super Nintendo and put it that if solid gameplay is your priority, this is your game. But if you're looking to be dazzled, try before you buy. So that's Judge Dredd then. You might like it, you might hate it, but I'm not going to judge you. There's a joke there. It's a lot better though than the unreleased Midway arcade game. Man, that game looked terrible. Look, some woman's taking Goro for a walk like he's a dog. Less I am the law than I am appalling.
So a lot of people might be wondering what I was going to do after the Spectrum videos, and I saw there's a lot of subscribers and money to be had out of ASMR videos, so I'm going to be tapping things like that. I've ordered a microphone and like an ear to lick like Amaranth. But yeah,
I think this is definitely the direction I should go in, because it'd be nice to calmly play games. What the
Willow.
How did I die there? Jesus, this... What? How the... Oh, you...
Willow.
Death. Bollocks to ASMR. In June 2022, Disney Plus released a teaser trailer for a televisual sequel to Willow, due for release in November of that year. This intro is great because if you watch it after November 2022, you'll smirk to yourself and go, the past, look at this dickhead. It's not my fault you're from the future, so go and sod off in your Jetsons flying car that makes this noise. Willow was a movie that held a lot of promise, which is why Capcom got all giddy and put out this video game currently being shown on your screen there, along with a NES title which was completely different, more of a sort of a happy shopper Legend of Zelda. There were also these games, the home computer versions published by Mindscape for the Commodore 64, Atari ST and Amiga, which were about as well received as a sorceress turning you into a pig outside of a Turner's food factory. You're going to end up in a sausage roll, son. Still, that is a fair few different computer games for a movie that was at best a moderate success, taking just 137 million in box office receipts from a budget of 35 million. The reason why it had all this interest was that the man behind it was none other than Mr. George Lucas, who, you may recall, had some success over the decade previous to Willow's 1988 release with a previous story about wizards. Directing was Ron Howard, who at that time was probably best known as Richie Cunningham from Happy Days, but had actually directed Steve Guttenberg shagging Illuminous Alien Ladies and Old People Breakdancing in the previous year's Cocoon. Willow, the film, not the chap, told the story of an evil queen called Bavmorda, who was imprisoning pregnant ladies as she feared a prophecy of a special child that would bring down her reign of oppressive twat-housery. The baby, Elora, the subject of the prophecy, ends up emerging from the womb unscathed anyway, and then ends up in the little hands of the eponymous trainee sorcerer, Willow. Yes, him off Tenable. Star of the Harry Potter franchise, well, kind of the star, he's in scenes where they need a little person in a suit, and part-time teddy bear in Return of the Jedi. Can he, along with Mad Martigan, played by Val Kilmer, and Bavmorda's turncoat daughter Sorsha, protect the little lady while all growing as people? Yes, of course they do. Spoilers, but yes, of course. Willow received a critical reception on par with its box office record. Pretty average, but it's well remembered by us nostalgic schlubs like myself who just can't let the past go. Which is why we're getting this TV show coming, I guess. Why can't we just grow up, eh? The arcade game came out in June 1989, a full year after the movie. It was part of a drive by Capcom director Yoshiki Yamamoto to give Capcom's arcade division a bit of a boost thanks to recognised characters from other media, with Area 88/UN Squadron being another property born from this strategy. The game came out on the CPS board and was a reasonable success. Yes, everything was averagely successful as regards Willow. I guess you could best describe it with that new youth parlance. Mid. Look at me, I'm down with the kids. Mid. Willow, as your eyes doth observe, is a side-scroller in a similar vein to Ghosts and Goblins, featuring the titular hero racing through platform-strewn locales based on scenes from the movie. These levels are relatively short, much like Willow, but absolutely are rock solidly hard. And it's little wonder that Warwick Davis has stress-dyed his hair the reddest live ultra-intense hair colourant that Schwarzkopf had to offer. Boy, that's red hair. Collecting coins dropped by the goons is essential, as you'll need to purchase the power-ups available at the shops. And trust me with this, you will need them. Both Willow and Mad Martigan, who you'll switch between throughout multiple levels of scrolling adventure fun, are fairly underpowered at the beginning, you see, with a piffling range. Martigan's sword swipes about an inch in front of his well-defined chin, whereas Willow's magical finger blasts shoot about as far as a T-Rex doing a dirty Sanchez-style seagulling. I'm not going to explain seagulling, hopefully you know what that is. And all you get is 4 hit points and no extra life as the default. It is easier to maintain an erection during a Willow's wife porn movie than it is to get through a level on 1 credit with the default weapon. The legions of tough guys, rat dogs, birds, trolls, archers and other goons will make your life as much misery as Warwick Davis feels when he sees his favourite flavour of Pringles being on a higher shelf in Tesco. It might be tough at times, but it is quite visually stunning for the era. A bright and colourful excursion in the land of Nockmaar and its surrounding areas. The music is Premiere Capcom Symphonia 2. It is, for an arcade game, an audio-visual treat. Yes, it's a tough challenge, but a varied adventure, and it sticks closely to the plotline of the movie, which isn't always the case with games of this nature. Sadly, Willow was never converted to the home formats, as, you know what, looking at it, it seems like it would have been a decent fit for the Megadrive or the Super Nintendo, but perhaps the licence had a limited time frame in which to come out, and the arcade was already a year late after the movie's release. Willow is not quite as good as Ghouls and Ghosts, Mega Man, or the other Capcom run and gun games, but it is a great little effort all the same. It's really wicked. I mean wicked. Yes, that was a joke, with me using wicked in the context of something being good, like people did in like 1993 or something. God, I am old. I best let you go and play this hard but brilliant adventure on your main box while I go and watch Tenable like the old fart I am. Like, subscribe, and K thanks, bye.
There's a game based on Cloak and Dagger? Really? What, you mean the teenagers from the Spider-Man comic who have the powers related to darkness and light? Them, they got a game that early, in 1983? That doesn't seem right at all. They're pretty minor characters to get a game that early. And yeah, I know they had that TV series in 2018, but they've always been like Z-tier Marvel. Wait, this isn't about Marvel's Cloak and Dagger at all, is it? There's only one of them for a start, and he seems to be all dressed as a spy. Oh, wait a minute, spies, maybe it's the other Cloak and Dagger, silly me. Cloak and Dagger was a World War II set spy movie made in 1946, directed by Fritz Lang and starring Gary Cooper. It's a bit strange of Atari to commission a game based on a very moderately successful film made 37 years beforehand. But wait, where are the Nazis? What? Where's the robots? This doesn't make any sense. Hitler didn't have robots, did he? Maybe I got the history books wrong. Maybe Wolfenstein was right. No, wait, there's another Cloak and Dagger. And now this terrible intro is out of the way, we can talk about that instead, because this is clearly the right game. And how do we know this? Because it's in the goddamn movie itself. Whoa, what's all this about? Well, Cloak and Dagger is a 1984 Universal Pictures spy caper that follows 11-year-old Davy. Davy's mother has passed away and his father is busy working for the military as an air traffic controller. Poor old Davy, all lonely and that, has ended up addicted to an Atari game called Cloak and Dagger. Ooh, the mystery already. Davy and his friend Kim go on an errand for the local video game shop owner, whereupon they witness the death of a spy, who, as he carks it, just so happens to be holding an Atari cartridge of Cloak and Dagger that holds all sorts of governmental secrets, and he asked Davey and Kim to take it to the FBI. As is the nature of 80s movies, the authorities don't believe that there are military secrets on this cartridge. Those silly 80s authorities, they'll get themselves in all kinds of trouble. Kim gets kidnapped by the sinister Dr. Rice and his cadre of spy shits, and so it is up to Davey to save the day, emboldened by an imaginary representation of the Cloak and Dagger game's hero, Agent X, aka Jack Flack. Think of Jack Flack in this game as a sort of drop-dead Fred type character, only instead of farting and doing Rick Maley things, he gives Davey all sorts of James Bond-esque advice. Jack Flack is imagined by Davey as being a sort of a more macho version of his father. There's some issues there, isn't there? Cloak and Dagger starred Henry Thomas, who played Elliot in E.T. Atari sure loved a bit of Henry Thomas's oeuvre in the early 80s, didn't they? Well, they did for a bit until they had to bone those cartridges. Jack Flack, Davey's dad, is played by a character actor, Daubney Coleman, who at 91 years old still continues to work. Daubney's been in a fair few big movies too, mainly in smaller roles, but he's probably best known for being the sexist boss from 9 to 5, as in, yes, the song. He never gave Dolly Parton credit, and it's enough to drive her crazy if she let it. Cloak and Dagger was released at a time when video games were seen as a sort of a muse for movies at the time. Movies like Tron, War Games, The Last Starfighter and this were seen as exciting opportunities for ideas for Hollywood at the time. And indeed, this movie was presented as a double bill with The Last Starfighter in cinemas on its initial release in June 1984. It did reasonable numbers when it was released with Last Starfighter, but ended up doing an awful lot worse when it was released on its own in August of the same year, pulling in a mere $10 million return from its standalone national release. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 67% based on 12 reviews from the critics and 56% based on audience reviews. It's alright. As you can probably tell from the storyline, the Cloak and Dagger game has quite a large part to play in Cloak and Dagger the movie, and you're here to see what this is all about, and I'm here to tell you those answers, otherwise we might as well just stop now. The movie features multiple shots of Henry Thomas holding a Cloak and Dagger Atari 5200 cart, and indeed playing it. However, there was no Atari 5200 game based on Cloak and Dagger actually released. So was the game just made up for the movie, like its cinematic stablemate, The Last Starfighter? No, a game did indeed emerge in the arcade, and it's here where the intrigue kicks in. The character of Davey is in fact playing the arcade version of Cloak and Dagger, according to a post to a 1995 message board, which is rec.games.video.classic. Such a memorable name for a message board. The post was made by a colleague of the programmer of the abandoned Atari 8-bit version of Cloak and Dagger, which was ditched when Atari's owner, Warner Communication, sold up to Commodore founder Jack Tramiel. Given the butt falling out of the US games market, Tramiel wanted the focus of Atari to be away from home video games to concentrate on the computer market. And to be fair to Tramiel, he knew how to launch a computer. The 5200 version of Cloak and Dagger was going to be an adapted version of these 8-bit computer versions of Cloak and Dagger, with the controls refigured so they worked with the 5200's controller. However, even the 8-bit computer versions of Cloak and Dagger never came out. So which game is in the movie? Well, it is the arcade version of Cloak and Dagger. It's all Hollywood magic, you see. It's pretty unlikely that the 5200 version would have been as graphically sharp had it had been released, and the arcade version of Cloak and Dagger was nearly finished
at the point that this movie was made. So what they did was they took the coin-up version, and when you see Henry Thomas playing the game, I'm saying playing in inverted commas because he wasn't playing it at all. The game had been played by Atari software developer Russell Dorr, and then the footage shown on the screen of the 5200 connected television was just them piping in footage from the coin-up that Russell Dorr was playing. It's all smoke and mirrors with these Hollywood Moogle clowns. The reason that the Cloak and Dagger arcade game was nearly finished because it had already been very far in development by the time that Universal Pictures got in contact with Atari. The game was slated to be a Robotron conversion kit called Agent X and uses that game's twin stick controls. They rejigged the graphics a little bit, renamed the game from Agent X to Cloak and Dagger, and here we are. So how does the Cloak and Dagger arcade game play? It's pretty decent fun. You are Agent X trying to make your way through Dr. Boom's underground lair, searching for some secret plans. Oh, it's just like the movie, isn't it? There are lifts on each side of the floor, and you need to get from one side of the floor to the other while numerous traps and security robots get in the way. Dr. Boom doesn't seem to be too smart to me. Why don't you just have lifts that go all the way up and down? Having lifts that go directly up one floor must be really expensive. Earlier levels are pretty straightforward. You can get from A to B very swiftly, and that is something you will need to do, as each level features a big old bomb in the middle that ignites and threatens to incinerate the good agent's moustache. If you're feeling cocky, you can ignite it yourself on your way to the other side of the fortress for bonus points. The further you go, the more traps there are, in particular landmines that are planted, and you can find yourself needing a resurrected Princess Diana, what with her work to do with landmine recovery charities, to cry to about your severed limbs. These flash as yellow crosses, which is usually enough info, but during a pitched firefight, you can be forgiven for not noting where you put your feet on the floor. So to make this easier, landmine plans can be collected that will give you a handy set of floor arrows. I can't help but think that Princess Diana, at the height of her sorting out all these landmine issues, should have just handed out these plans, and there may have been a few children with more feet in Africa. Once you've gotten the super important secret plans, not the landmine ones, on the bottommost floor, you've then got to take them all the way back out of this secret layer. And it looks like they've rather swiftly cleaned up each bomb-ruined floor and indeed up the security, as the game continues to be more difficult as you go. Although it's a nice touch that they put a large crater in the places where bombs were exploded in the game. As it was a conversion kit from Robotron, the controls were very similar, using one joystick for shooting and one for moving around Agent X. There aren't the insane level of enemies on screen as there are in Robotron, but to be fair, this is due to the fact that there are more detailed environments, and the level of traps and landmines more than make up for that. In between each floor you get some comedic cutscenes featuring Agent X going in between floors, which are nicely animated and sort of fairly amusing, I guess. The game is pretty good fun, probably not as good as the software it replaced in Robotron, but I wouldn't have been too upset to have seen this in the cabinet instead. It's pretty unique to play what is less a game adaptation of a movie for me, but more of a companion piece. I mean, it's in the film itself. So what is this and Super Mario Bros. 3 from the Wizard in terms of game companion pieces instead of movie adaptations? And just like the Wizard, the game is a bit better than the movie, in all honesty. CVG gave it a column in their issue 32 with no score, but seemed to like it by admiring its graphical style, particularly the interfloor animations, and they also said it's pretty easy to master the controls. So, Atari, when are we going to get video games based on Legends of the Fall, Suicide Kings, 1114 and 2002 romantic comedy I'm With Lucy, seeing as you love Henry Thomas's work so much? Probably best not to do Gerald's game though. if you've seen Gerald's game, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye. I'm not saying anything particularly controversial when I say that Star Wars was very, very popular in the early 80s. Not just the movie itself, but all the merchandise that made it very interesting to capitalist America. So, every production company wanted their own Star Wars. Some were very, very, very blatant, things like Battlestar Galactica, Flash Gordon, Star Chaser, The Last Starfighter, you know the ones. They are all very spacey though. Krull, it's not massively spacey, it's very fantasy based. I mean, look, there's swords, sorcery, castles, horses, a lack of starfighters dueling in the inky blackness of the limitless void that is space. And yet, it's possibly the most Star Warsy of them all. I mean, the film starts with a long shot of a cone-shaped vessel approaching a planet. There's a princess that gets regal napped and put in a seemingly impenetrable fortress. The hero's family is killed by laser-totting troopers. He's then rescued and nursed back to health by an old man who lives in the wilderness and has felt compelled to come back to guide this young protagonist. The old man takes him to a weapon unique to this movie, in this case a glaive, which is only usable by the Chosen One. He then gathers a crew who go on to rescue the princess and destroy the fortress of the oppressive regime who rules the galaxy. Oh, and the princess is called Princess Leia. It's close enough. Oh, and there's a scene where the walls close in, threatening to squash our heroes. So yes, it is very, very Star Warsy. Columbia knew what they were doing. They wanted a Star Wars level of success when this was released in 1983. They had the merchandise to back it up: a Marvel comic, t-shirts, a novel, a board game, a card game, a pinball machine was in the works but never came out, and 2 video games, which is what this video is all about. They were prepped before the release was even made. And, well, it didn't go too well. From its $27 million budget, it only recouped a dismal $16.9 million. On Rotten Tomatoes, the movie is sat on a rather grim 35% based on 26 critic reviews. Is it that bad? I don't think so. It feels more like a Jason of the Argonauts or a Sinbad movie than a Star Wars movie, despite the obvious inspiration of A New Hope. I think it's got stuff. Good stuff. I mean, you've got your quintessential 80s quicksand. You've got flaming sky horses. How metal are they? The glaive is both cool and iconic, a sort of shuriken that returns to the hand. And cool to a bleak bastard like me, the heroes die, sometimes in quick succession. P.T. Yates, the director, clearly does have some grand and impressive sets and shots in his repertoire as well. The strangest thing for me, though, is the cast. Ken Marshall plays the main hero, Prince Colwyn, who, aside from being in Deep Space Nine, hasn't really done a lot since. He's perfectly serviceable in this movie. He's no Harrison Ford in terms of charisma, but he does a decent job. Then you've got our princess, who's played by Lizette Anthony, a model and actress who has gone on to have a fairly decent career on television, though clearly not trusted with this role, as she was overdubbed by American actress Lindsay Krause. That's something you may not know, but it will now be very noticeable when you watch the movie. Why did Yates choose to do this? Well, there's 2 stories. Either it was because that Lizette Anthony sounded a bit too English, although that's really strange because nearly all the rest of the cast is English, including the actor playing a dad. Or the other story is that she didn't sound old enough. I mean, Lizette Anthony was 16 when this started filming, so there's no surprise there. It's a weird choice, though. I don't know why they just didn't cast someone else if they thought her voice didn't sound right. Now, the real interest comes from the very eclectic mix they've got for the rest of the cast. What a mix it is. Francesca Annis, a much beloved and lusted over MILF figure, is aged up to play an old mysterious widow. Alan Armstrong, he with the funny spelling of Alan, plays bandit leader Tarquil, and he's backed up by Liam Neeson and a young Robbie Coltrane, who himself was overdubbed by Boone actor Michael Elphick. He must have sounded too Scottish, I don't know. Then you've got, of all people, Todd Carty. Yes, Tucker from Grange Hill, Mark Fowler from EastEnders, and Todd Carty from Touch of Cloth. But best of all is Cyclops Rell, who's played by none other than Carry On's Bernard Bresslaw. Yes, the lumbering lunk that used to back up Sid James in all those movies. What a surreal cast this is. Probably the most surreal that you'll ever find in cinema. Overall, Krull the movie, it deserves a few more eyes, I think. It does have its issues, like some of the shots are a bit too overlong and you're like, okay, move on to the next thing. The pacing is well off with it. It's quite pretty though, it's quite charming. It definitely is no Star Wars, but let's see what the game's like. So as I said earlier, the merchandising hype train had gone a bit crazy with Krull unnecessarily, and it saw us get not one but two Krull games, the arcade version and one on the Atari 2600, which I'm not going to say too much about. I mean, I could, but not today. I've got things to do today, sorry. The Atari 2600 version was by Atari themselves and was a very different game from its arcade counterpart. In both, you play as the Chris Pratt-looking protagonist Prince Colwyn, because the world hates us and the wait to play as a one-eyed carry-on actor will have to continue, which it does still 40 years later. But at least Prince Colwyn has that badass glaive to throw about. It, like its arcade brethren, is a multi-stage affair. In the first level, you have to fend off Slayer goons as they try to steal away Princess Lisa. You fail whatever you do, because that's what happens in the movie. Curse you, fate! Then you encounter a F-off big spider, and regrettably, you don't have an 8-foot glass and a bar mat the size of a shed roof. Instead, you must find a path to the Black Fortress. Then you've got a horse riding bit where you have to load up on glaives for your fight with the beast. This should be no problem. Yeah. You'll need to use your glaives to free the princess from the beast's penitentiary and put the ugly git to the sword. That's the beast, not Lizette Anthony. She's comely. It's fun enough for a VCS game. It's as rudimentary as you'd expect from a game of this type. The spider bit is a bit too annoying for me to give it a thumbs up though. So yeah, I said this summing up of the Atari version was going to be short, and short it was. But feel privileged that I talked about it, yeah? Because we're going to go on now to Gottlieb's 1983 coin-operated effort. Graphically, it's obviously going to be a step up from the Atari video game in terms of the looks. It's kind of like a lower tier early NES black box title. But it's a serviceable enough look, particularly when it gets all busy, and busy things indeed do get. Look at all these boulders rolling down this rather underfed mountain. Where are they all coming from? The aim of this section is to put together Colwyn's knackered old glaive, which is broken and scattered across the terrain. This opening section is fairly easy. You can dart in between the rolling rocks with relative ease, and if you do so much as lose one life on this level, I'm telling everyone, yes, even your mum, especially your mum. The next level cranks up the difficulty increase a little bit as the enemies change from non-sentient stones to a villainous army as the Slayers enter the fray and start blasting away. They are insisting that Colwyn takes part in a Robotron 2084 ripoff, and so Colwyn duly obliges. The prince must rescue his crew while taking down his opponents with that glaive, which, in keeping with the movie, acts like a boomerang and can destroy the Slayer goons as it returns to your hand. The more opponents you kill, the more dangerous and panicked the remaining bad guys become, firing as they do their bolts willy-nilly. You'll want to take down the last few goons pretty swiftly because they go all crazy and shite. They can, because it's a Robotron ripoff, take out your guys, though they will concentrate on you mainly. This, like the first level, And each of the other levels, as we're going to come to a bit later on, are over supremely quickly, unless you goof it up and end up belly up, in which case the level starts again.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Level 3 is pretty similar to level 2, only there are walls and those bloody rocks again. Only this time they're not even moving and they can't harm you, they just get in the bloody way. Your glaive nor the enemy's blaster bolts can penetrate through the scenery, which adds an extra challenge. And you still have to get to your guys for that delicious bonus point euphoria. Rescue Toddcati! The next level has you attacking the front wall of the hexagon that acts as a prison for your army. You can only hit it when it's black. Really? Cancel this game.
That's crazy!
If you chip away at the wall enough, your crew will be free and you'll go on to the final level. Now, the final confrontation is with the big old beast, a scary figure from the movie, although he's a lot shorter here. You must avoid his attacks and charge like Billy-O straight at Princess Lisa to rescue her, and then you've finished the game. Probably in about 2 to 3 minutes. Yes, this is teenage boy's first sexual encounter length in its duration. Pump, pump, hiccup the yop. Technically, the game doesn't end there, it just loops faster over and over again. But it is a game that, if you're good enough at it, you can see everything it has in 2 minutes. That's really not great, is it? Yes, this is true of a fair few games of the time, but the film narrative nature of this game leaves you a little bit shortchanged compared to the more obvious score attack type gameplay in Pac-Man, Space Invaders or Donkey Kong. I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, especially considering Atari's Star Wars, but the levels in that felt grander and they lasted a little bit longer than the levels in this. Not much longer, mind. And I can't really recommend it for its gameplay because the shortness of each stage is so prevalent. It's just so bish bash bosh, you're done. There's a decent game in there probably, it's just it lasts as long as a stage in WarioWare or something. It's designed to make you go, oh, there's a game based on that movie I saw, put a couple of coins in it, play it for a couple of minutes, and then get on with your day. Only hardly anyone saw the movie. It is what it is, I suppose. A website called All Game Guide, which was a 90s early aughts gaming website, reviewed Gottlieb's Krull in 1998. When summing up their review, they mentioned that in the movie, the captured princess has a discussion with her captor, the Beast. The Beast says, "Power is eternal, love is fleeting." When the opposite is proved, Lisa points out that the reverse is true. Power is fleeting, love is eternal. They were both wrong. Krull is fleeting. And you know what? All Game Guide were right. I mean, my video here stands about 6 times longer than the average playthrough of its first loop. So there we go. At least it's matching the longevity of the appeal of the film, so extra points for accuracy. Anyway, that's enough of this. I'm going to go and find out what Toddcati's been up to lately. Like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye.
Surely this movie represents the ultimate nerdist fantasy, doesn't it? A big old middle finger to those people throughout our lives. The parents, the significant others, the nurse at the old people's home that insists that your favourite hobby is a big old waste of time. Playing games. How can it be? What if this game is actually a recruitment programme for an alien race for me to become a warrior in an ancient war? They're going to scoop me up, covered in sweat and Kettle Crisp crumbs, and turn me into Luke Skywalker because I finished Star Fox without dying once in 1993. Sure, I'm not sure if that really works if you're playing, say, Chris Kamara's Street Soccer on the PlayStation 1 or A Dog's Life on PlayStation 2. But let's not split hairs here. It's a fantasy concept that has enthralled from Generation X to Generation Z. And despite its relative lack of success in the cinema, Last Starfighter's cult classic status keeps seeing potential sequels and remakes, both cinematic and TV based, mooted as potential ideas for money spinning. Original screenwriter Jonathan R. Bettiol
was reticent for The Last Starfighter to take to the stars once again, despite badgering from the likes of Seth Rogen, Steven Spielberg, and UK games journalist alumni turned Rogue One screenwriter Gary Whitta. He's made several attempts to get this moved along, has our Gary. However, it looks like in March 2021, courtesy of Whitta's Twitters, that some genuine progress had been made on this. But that's a long time ago now. We're in 2024. Will a sequel happen to The Last Starfighter? Who knows? I'd say the best bet for it happening is if Spielberg feels like following up his movie adaptation of Ready Player One with another of Ernest Cline's other novels, that being Armada. Trust me, it's basically the same story as The Last Starfighter. But why should you care if there's a sequel? I can see why you wouldn't. There's enough going on in the world right now, but as you clicked on this video, you probably do want to hear about it. So, The Last Starfighter was a 1984 movie distributed by Universal Pictures that was directed by Nick Castle, who also directed The Boy Who Could Fly and Dennis the Menace. No, the American one, not the one with Nasher and Walter the Softie. Nick is perhaps more famous as an actor than a director, as he played one of the most iconic figures on the silver screen, that being Michael Myers in the original Halloween, as well as appearing as Michael in the recent trio of sequels. Last Starfighter is one of the very first movies, along with fellow video game-inspired effort Tron, to use CGI in large amounts to depict the cosmic war in the movie's second half. Teenager Alex Rogan is having a decidedly early existentialist crisis in the trailer park he resides in with his mum and brother Lewis. Having failed to gain a scholarship, Alex wastes time on a mysterious arcade first-person space shoot-'em-up called Starfighter. It's not long until Alex's practice pays off and he finds himself atop of the score table, and also finds himself at the attention of a mysterious man called Centauri. Centauri invites him into his posh car, claiming to be the game's inventor. Now, children, listen really closely to this. If an old man in a posh car invites you into his car saying he's impressed with your wrist action, please do not get in. Or do, as he might be an alien recruiting pilots for an intergalactic conflict, a real one, between the Ryland Star League and the Kodan Empire. You see, the cabinet was indeed this. It was a tool to filter out people who were really good at games, like Mike Matei or One Credit Classics, as opposed to people like me and Douglas Titchmarsh, who aren't very good at games. Yeah, well, I might not be good at games, but at least I won't die in flames in the inky black nothingness of cold space millions of light years away from home, he mithered sourly. Can Alex prove himself to be a top gunner for the Ryland Star League with his partner Grig? Yes, obviously. This isn't some sort of miserable Mike Lee kitchen drama with reptilian space co-pilots. Of course he wins at the end. That's not a spoiler. Well, it is, but it's not. Lance Guest, who played Alex, has had a long career in Hollywood, with appearances in renowned shows like St. Elsewhere, X-Files, Dallas, House, Jag and NYPD Blue. He also had roles in Jaws the Revenge and Halloween 2, getting attacked by the same character his director played, but not actually him, because he wasn't in Halloween 2. Centauri was played by Robert Preston in a role specifically written for him. It proved to be his final major cinematic role in a long career dating back to the 1930s. Under the makeup of Grig was Dan O'Herlihy, who was in Halloween 3. What is it with all these people and Halloween films? But yes, he was most known to you and I as being the old man in the first two RoboCop movies. That's the old CEO of the company, isn't it? The Last Starfighter has a score of 76% based on 86 reviews on review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes. While it had a dismal return of just $29 million from its initial $15 million outlay, Last Starfighter has gained a strong cult following since its home media release. I mean, there can't be many poorly performing cinematic releases that have spawned an off-Broadway musical show, But bloody Last Starfighter has, hasn't it? On to the games, and well, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Officially, we only have one video game, that being the one we're going to cover today on the NES. There were plans for Atari to release the arcade from the movie shortly after the movie came out that was filled with battle scenes from the film. It was even going to use the same yoke mould as the previous Star Wars cabinet and was going to run on the same Motorola 6800 processing engine as your dear old Amiga or your Megadrive. However, Atari bigwigs watched the film before release and did not think it was going to be a massive success. See, Atari weren't completely useless businessmen in the early 1980s. They just... well, they were, weren't they? This probably is the reason that the Atari 2600 and the Atari 5200 versions, along with the 8-bit Atari computer versions, were abandoned like unwanted dogs in the woods as well. Although in this case, the dogs weren't abandoned in the woods, they just had their identities changed and rehomed. The already developed console versions were rebranded as Solaris, whereas the computer versions came out with some minor changes under the auspices of Star Raiders 2. Some industrious youths called Rogue Synapse set out to recreate that original arcade game, though, from the film, using sound effects and music from the movie in 2007. It's pretty faithful to the film and can be downloaded in a link I'll provide below. They even built a working cabinet of the machine. If you see it, get on it. You never know, Rogue Synapse might actually be an alien space pilot recruitment team. I mean, they could be. They're not. And what of the actual proper officially released game developed by Graph Gold and published by Mindscape in the summer of 1990, some 6 years after the movie came out? One would imagine that the license probably was a little bit cheaper at that point. Well, it probably looks familiar if you're a fan of 8-bit computer games. Yes, as you have identified probably by now, this is Iridium. Yes, indeed, a tarted up Iridium with a different title screen, sprites and music, but it's still Iridium. Iridium, for the uninitiated, was a critical darling commercial hit in 1986 for Hewson Consultants when it was released on the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum, with releases later coming out on the Amstrad CPC, MS-DOS, Amiga, BBC Micro and Atari ST. As you can see, it is very, very similar indeed to the Last Starfighter on the NES. Graph Gold programmed the original title too, so if you wanted to port Iridium over to the NES, there's probably no finer folk to do so. The honour of that programming and porting over to the NES fell to Nick Eastridge, who ported this all by himself. He was a programmer also on WWF King of the Ring on the NES and Ren and Stimpy Vidiots. In Iridium, and indeed the Last Starfighter, you're placed in the cockpit of a spaceship and you must face the challenge of an encroaching battalion of 15 bloody big dreadnoughts that are coming into your territory and causing all kinds of fuss. They're each accompanied by a fuctillion strong armada of smaller ships, and you, as the only pilot who turned up at work that day, must take them on alone. Each of the dreadnoughts represents a horizontally scrolling level, and you must scooch along the top of each, causing damage and taking out the fighters. You can accelerate and decelerate, swoop backwards to take out annoying turrets and craft that you might have missed on your first run, and generally acts as a bit of an annoying deadly gnat upon the back of these great Star Destroyer style Uber vehicle beasts. Once you've acted enough of a rascal, you'll render the ship safe enough for you to land near its control centre at the rear of the vehicle. You'll automatically set the charges and then escape the ensuing carnage before taking on the next, increasingly more difficult starship in the next level. Once you've completed the lot, the game loops around. Here's the thing about this game, in both its versions, be it the bog standard computer one played in Bolton by kids in tracksuits that look like they belong on the German national team of 1990, or its swish American Hollywood version played by kids with mullets in Delaware. It is a game that is utterly divisive. There's aspects you can't argue against. Its scrolling is slicker than Calm off a gold tooth. The control is as responsive as a fly 5 cans deep into a crate of Monster energy drink, and the central concept of a series of obstacle-scattered spaceships as levels is a bloody cool one, no matter how you look at it. However, what it also is this. It is screamingly difficult. Only the most hardy of souls will defeat the first battleship, let alone its 14 chums. And at times, it's just plain unfair. The obstacles on the dreadnoughts are hard to decipher as being dangerous in your initial runs. They simply don't look tall enough to worry our digital Alex. But boom you will go as you crash into a seemingly innocuous fence that actually turns out to be a communications turret. The game demands that you always move at a fairly quick rate, for if you dawdle, a heat-seeking space torpedo will be launched at you, and boy oh boy, you better hit the accelerator or it will blow you up. And when you go at speed, 9 times out of 10, you'll be crashing into the staff room of the spaceship just as they're enjoying their jacket spuds. It is really difficult to decipher what is safe to fly over and what isn't. But if a bit of furniture doesn't take you out, then maybe an enemy pilot will. They will appear out of nowhere, blasting away, and if you're in front of them, you're dead. It is unrelenting, harsh, and will summon primal screams from you that will scare not just your cat, but the cats of many houses away, perhaps in different roads. There's no shield bar on your ship, and boy, could Last Starfighter be a better game if it had a life bar on it. It's just you and 5 lives to go through the game, all 15 ships, no continues. Yikes, this game hates you. The Last Starfighter will ground you down into a paste, swallow you, and defecate you into the toilet if you let it. Yet in spite of this, and my aversion to games that are unforgivably difficult, such as The Last Starfighter, I kept playing it. Despite being ancient enough to have encountered the original Uridium, I never have, so this was a bit of a shock. And just like the reviewers of Uridium, I really enjoyed it. I kept trying, even as I was inventing new words to insult it in a loud tone. Whereas that version of the game, though, got scores ranging from the 70s to perfect scores in the old computer magazines of the UK, The Last Starfighter, this version of it, is very much maligned. It's difficult to find a lot of opinion on the NES version from the time, perhaps it didn't sell that well, but Moby Games has reviews from Pat Contry's Nintendo Guidebook and the Questicle website that seem to be extremely uncomplimentary of the game, and rightly so for the reasons I've already described. And I get it, in a way, there's not a lot to it. It's very much a tape-loaded computer game from half a decade before, and you're expected to fork out 40 quid for it on a cartridge. And when I said it looked tarted up earlier, basically it's put on a bit lippy. It's not particularly good looking, this game. It is not a stunning looking NES title, absolutely not. So why is there such a difference of opinion on this game? Is it because us veterans of the old European computer game war are made of sterner stuff? I don't think it's that. We all know that the NES has its own fair share of tough games titles. I mean, just look at Ninja Gaiden. And is it that home computer players have lower standards? I don't think it's that either. So who knows? Whatever the nationality, there's little question that if you should finish this game on your first sitting, then I know who I want Centauri picking up in his swanky pedo wagon to space pilot school. You. Provided you operate your spaceship from a top-down perspective, flying only on one plane in only 2 directions, using a 2-button control pad from the 1980s. But you. Anyway, that's the end of my review. So like, subscribe, and thanks, bye.
I'm going to be somehow more annoying than the people that say that Die Hard is the best Christmas film ever by saying that Die Hard is the best Christmas game ever as well. And by Die Hard, I mean the Activision NES game, which we're playing right now. Look at this.
This is a game that I didn't actually, when I first saw it in the magazines, I thought, this looks terrible. And it wasn't until a lot later I discovered it a bit more. It was by, as I say, Activision. It has you as John McClane, for some reason wandering around in white pyjamas. Don't know why. But it's so clever, and I'm going to sort of talk you through it as we play through it. So the first thing to say about it is that those big black blotches on the screen that keep sort of appearing and disappearing, they're meant to be there. What it is it's John McClane's field of vision. So he can't see inside that lift until it opens. He can't see that floor now because the door's shut. And I know it gives you the walls, but bear with me. So yeah, he walks out and you can only see around the corner. You can see a little bit more around the corner. You can see the whole thing and there's a man there. How clever is that? Really innovative. Really, really innovative. There's about like 5 or 6 floors you can wander around. And there is exactly the right amount of terrorists. There's never too many terrorists. There's a score of terrorists that you shoot that will keep going down as you wander around. And the idea behind that is that should you get to the end of the game, the more terrorists you kill towards the end of the game, the less there will be on the last floor with Hans, old Alan Rickman. And what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to follow the plot of the film. I've just got the blueprints there, as you see. Now, the blueprints, what they're for is you get the blueprint and you will use that to determine whereabouts in, floor 4 the computer is. The computer which, and I don't remember the name of the guy. I am going to watch Die Hard this weekend for the first time in my son, but the computer expert that Hans has, he blow that up and it will slow him down, because this game is sort of operating in a sort of Dead Rising time, in the fact that you have to do certain tasks in a certain time limit. So every now and again you'll get a message up when you're going between floors, and I think you see a little timer go down when you go between floors. And you will see that that the computer guy has undone another one of the locks for the vault, which is the reason that Hans and his crew are there, which is at the plot of the movie, as you saw there. And so if you see in a minute, there'll be a little timer. You see that? That little timer, it means that he's about to undo the first lock. Now, what I'm trying to do at the moment is I'm trying to complete several things that happen in the movie. So I'm on the roof because I need to send a message to the local police to help me out. And you should see, I'll move to the edge of the building. You get a cutscene and the police are now on their way. They're aware that something is happening at the Nakatomi Plaza. And as you dart down, there you go, lock 1 is down. And another thing that happens is, because if you shoot on a certain floor, Hans will send another terrorist to your floor to fight you. You can probably see an energy bar there. That's John McClane's health that can be replenished by drinking cola. It's an American. That's how they survive. They drink cola. Yeah. I'm going to drink a cola now. But there's another health bar. And the other health bar is, again, in what is essentially a brilliant retelling of the Die Hard film, is his feet. And so if you ever see, and you will a bit later on, you'll see some first aid kits. They are designed to heal his feet. Now, what you see there is not a dildo or a butt plug, it's a rocket. So I need the rocket and the blueprint, and now I need to get to the 4th floor, which is being controlled by the terrorists from this... from a computer room, which I'm just about doing now. As you can see, I'm going through the vents, just like Die Hard. And you can see the vision there is because you can see through the grill. And there's a terrorist there who's on patrol. And I will go and attack him now. He's made me drop my rocket, so you drop items as you go through. There's multiple endings. It's all very clever. And I've used the computer to operate the executive lift, which is coming, which is the only way you can get to floor 4. Now, if you leave it too late, I think by the 3rd lock, the computer expert takes control of that lift and you're not able to use it. but there's bonuses down there, and you can slow them down. It gives you a bit longer game time, because there's certain things you need to do to progress. But you can get bad endings and things as well. Like he can kill Holly, or they can get away, obviously. So if you die, obviously they get away with the money, but you could also fail to catch hands. This is going to be a playthrough where I will finish it properly. I will save Holly, and it'll be just like the film. So now I've got the rocket launcher there, and I've just had a quick look to see where the computer is. The computer's in that bottom corner. It changes every time you play it, so you can't always aim for the main thing. And I've slowed down the terrorists. And yes, this really is the best Christmas game ever. I'm standing by it, because there's so much love and adoration of one of the best 80s action films. The only thing I don't like is waiting for the lifts. As you can see, I'm just dead air as I wait for a lift to appear, and I'm in. Yay! But you can hear their footsteps as they're running about, so you can tell if there's people before. You can actually hear them. You'll get tips from the policeman when he arrives, and he will tell you where he's seen terrorists using his view from the outside. I don't need to heal my feet. My feet are in good condition. Now, the feet damage, what that does is that slows you down. So you'll see a bit later on, I'll be a lot slower on my feet, where I need a first aid kit to repair the damage that's been done by the terrorists to my poor old plates of meat. Now, as you can see there, he shot the glass. We're on the office level, which is glass walls. So that will do further damage to my feet. It'll slow you down, and it makes the game a lot more harder, because you are against the clock a little bit. As you can see there, the terrorist surprised me. I did see him a bit earlier on. You can go through that glass, but obviously, as I say, that will slow you down. And I'm waiting here because I think there's more terrorists that will appear from that lift. Maybe I don't do that in this bit. The drinks machines, you can shoot them once and break all the cans of Coke out of them to get a bit of health. Health is very limited throughout the game, not only obviously for your feet, but also for your Bruce Willis body. He's got a lot more hair than Bruce Willis in this, even during Bruce Willis's pomp. You'll see in like the end credits bit, because I do indeed finish it, 25 crooks left, that they've been very generous with Bruce's fringe there. I'm just sort of checking out what I need to do now. So I've got 25 crooks to get. You saw my foot health was in fairly good condition, certainly better than my health. Waiting for the lift to turn up. Here we go. And I'm going to try, I think at this point, I'm trying to... I can't remember what I'm trying to do in this bit. Because you could go around and shoot terrorists at any point and obviously reduce the amount that you've got to fight. They come in different varieties. There's the machine gun ones. There's the guys in green who just have pistols. They often drop health. So he's just summoned Heinrich to go to the 31st floor. So he's going to cause me trouble. So he's clearly heard me causing a ruckus upstairs, but he's a bit behind on the times. But my next mission, I think, is to go and get the detonators. Because the detonators will let me operate the C4. And the C4 sort of lets you get into secret rooms, but also delays the terrorists, because the terrorists need the detonators and the C4 to make the final step to getting the money out of the building. As you can see now, they've taken control of the express elevator. You get other little messages. If you're in the vents too long, Hans will tell you to shoot the vents. Oh, not you, but he'll tell the terrorists to shoot the vents. I'm just healing up my feet again. And we're about to see, in a minute, perhaps the only thing that, if you didn't know the film Die Hard, connects this game to Christmas. So just like the movie, the connection to Die Hard being a Christmas game, the NES one, is there is one single item in this entire game that connects it to Christmas. And we're going to see that in a minute, and I will let you know when. In fact, I will play a little ditty on a kazoo, because you're lucky like that. C4 in there. That room's empty, and there's Christmas. Yay! Yeah, there's one Christmas tree in the game. But it's still the best Christmas game ever. And yes, I know that Die Hard Trilogy exists, but I think this is better. I think this is more creative. I like the variety in Die Hard Trilogy on the PlayStation 1 and the Dreamcast. Not Dreamcast, it was Saturn, wasn't it? Yeah, there's something about this game. I only played it like 4 or 5 years ago, and it, to me, is incredible. It's literally incredible. Like, I'm using the C4 here. Look, you can tell it's primed, and it's a big explosion that will kill you instantly if you get near it. But it also kills terrorists as well. Because there's one other enemy type I didn't mention, and they are the guys in white. Guys in white, there is they're sort of like the main henchmen of hands, and you've got to be careful of them because they take a lot of damage, but the C4 does wipe them out. There's not many. I think there's two. I've killed one already, although I don't remember seeing him, but apparently I got the detonator from him, because one of them carries a detonator, and then the other one is usually stationed with Hans on his floor, which is floor 30, which is where they keep all the hostages. You can't go there yet and take out Hans because you're waiting for the hostages to go, because they put them on the roof. That's another thing that you won't see in this playthrough, which I should have probably done, is you can reenact the scene from the movie where Bruce Willis ties the hose around himself and then jumps off and goes through a window. You can do that. I don't do it in this playthrough. That's how good this game is. It's very flexible. As I said, there's multiple endings. There's multiple ways to do the task. It's very open, and I think it's easily the best, for me anyway, the best Western NES game. So I know that takes a lot, but it does exclude the obviously best NES games, which are Japanese. So your Marios, your Zeldas, and your Metroids. I'm doing that football thing, aren't I? You know, your Vialis, your Ronaldos. Viali, crikey, he's not even alive anymore. I'm getting old. But yeah, at the moment, what I'm doing, and there's perhaps another issue with the game, apart from waiting for the lifts, is there'll be vast swathes of the game where you're waiting for things to happen. So you can go around, you can troop around shooting villains, which is what I'm doing at the moment, waiting for the next few locks to go, because you're waiting for the terrorists to get really cocky, unlock the safe, and then they put the hostages on the roof as a distraction. But yeah, that there, I should just dropped, is the detonator, because I've used the detonator for its main purpose, and that can change the ending of the game as well. Is if you drop the detonator, then they get control back of it if you don't go and pick it up again, and that then changes how the storyline progresses, because they get the detonator they need to complete the mission of blowing up the entrance to the safe. But I don't think I lose it. I repeatedly drop it because I'm a butterfingers who gets shot in the face a lot. But yeah, those little round things are sort of stun grenades, if you're wondering. I don't like using them very often because they're really hard to hit a target. Machine guns, whoa ho ho, I've got a machine gun. They're really good. It's sometimes quite hard to hit your opponents, as hard as it is for them to hit you. So I found the best way to take them down is to use like a sweeping motion, and it sort of sends like a hail of bullets. So you sort of do like a Street Fighter quarter circle, and it sort of throws a banana shape of bullets at the villains, and it will take most of them down. If you try and shoot them sort of direct face to face at angles, it's difficult and they will hit you. So that's how I do it. Another way of doing that is kind of hide around the corner if you know they're coming after you, and sort of shoot. I'm recommending this game very, very highly, even if you don't have an NES console. It really is one of the best games on the system. I can't praise it enough. I mean, you might look at the visuals and go, yeah, it looks a bit crappy. And I get that. That's what I was thinking many years ago. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. There's the cop there who's just told me there's trouble on the 33rd floor, I think he said. So I'm going to go, all right, mate, I believe you. I'm going to go down to the 33rd floor and I'm going to see what's popping. And there he was right. There's that man in his lovely green sleeveless shirt there. Look at him, he's dead. He's dropped a cola out of his pocket or his bum. I don't care, I'm going to drink it. The one thing I will say is that I think you can get a bit used to the game, and it does. It's not a very long game once you know what you're doing. It's very, very difficult when you first start playing because you'll be completely baffled about what to do, even if you've watched the film. And you'll either run out of time or lives very quickly. But you can complete the game, as you'll see here, in about 25 minutes. But I would say at that point, and it's something I've yet to do properly, there is a sort of an expert setting you can choose, and the expert setting randomizes things up a little bit more. You start on different floors. There's still a random element to this game. Like, for instance, the bit at the beginning you saw with the rocket and the map, that moves around on that floor. Now, I think in the harder version of it, I think they can change floors. And you take more damage when you get shot. The terrorists take more damage before they go down. We demand helicopter transports for the hostages in the roof. Now, they're not up there yet, so I can't go up there. And indeed, I don't think I end up doing the bit with the hostages. I sort of, when they say there's hostages on the roof, I just leave them to it, and I go straight and rescue Holly. I think they're still saved. I didn't hear anything to the contrary. I might have killed hundreds of people because I'm trying to get my my side piece. It's actually his wife, isn't it? It's his wife. It's not his side piece. It's his main front piece. Let's talk about Bruce Willis's front piece. But yeah, I think it's a good year to play this because obviously Bruce now is unfortunately not very well, and next year we might be in a bit of a Shane McGowan Pogue situation where we're sort of melancholically, if that's a word, watching Die Hard. He's obviously lost the ability to act now. His apparently speech is in a lot of trouble. I will show you here the bit where you get the hose. He's not desperate enough to jump off. Now, the reason he'd be desperate to jump off is because there'll be a helicopter shooting him and the building's about to explode at the top. So, yeah, he's not in that situation yet. He can still use his feet and stairs. And there's another way you can go down without using stairs, which is you can climb through the vent here. There's a vent on the roof. 2 air vents on the roof. That's what the guy was talking and shit. That's the Tenacious D song that no one remembers. So I'm a bit bunged up today. Anyway, let's talk about colds, being sniffy, and Tenacious D. Let's go back to Die Hard. I am sort of pacing. Yeah, and the other thing about Die Hard is a lot of really good games. There's not only this, obviously the PlayStation trilogy. I never played the Nakatomi Plaza game that came out a couple of generations ago. I don't know if that's any good. The PC Engine one, which is absolutely bonkers, that I might play next year. You have to do a playthrough of that, which starts you off in a jungle outside the Nakatomi Plaza in New York. Yeah, with a swamp. Right. Okay. That's mad, that game. And then there's the totally bonkers Sega arcade beat 'em up as well, which was very loosely based on Die Hard. Didn't really follow the plot, but it was damn cool. I like that game. But yeah, as I say, visually this game looks not great. I get that. I do get that. But I do recommend, if you're a fan of this type of game, there's so much innovation here, and even though I've ruined most of it already, I do think that you should give it a go. There's only so many ways I can tell you that you're wrong about this game, but you might not like it because it is occasionally frustrating when you try and work out what you've got to do if you've never played it before. And the terrorists can be swines. They can gang up on you. You could go on a certain floor and find like 5 or 6 or 7 terrorists all causing all kinds of hassles for you. And it makes it very hard because they just pin you down. But how cool is that? That's how John McClane would get, you know, in the movies. I don't know. I've not watched any of the sort of older films. The newer films, like the 4 and 5, and is there a 6th one? I think there is. There's one where he's like in Russia or something. I've watched 4, I think, but yeah, that wasn't great. Die Hard 3, yeah, that's all right. Die Hard 2, do you know what? I think I've only seen that once. It's the one on the planes. That was okay, I think. And this year I will be showing my son the first. There you go. Without detonators, our plans are ruined. So I've got the detonator still. Their plans are in. They're going to escape. Now they're sort of sending out the dregs of their terrorist effort. I've got 5 crooks left to fight. 5 crooks. So what I'm going to do, I know the hostages are now not part of the equation. I'm no longer banned from going to that floor. So I'm going to have the final showdown with Hans and his remaining goons. Goons, I said. So I'm on my way now. Floor 30, the big climactic battle with that crew of numpties. And so this is the last floor. That in the middle, I believe, is like a little pool, I think, from if it's supposed to be that thing from the film. Look at me, I'm taking down names, destroying folk. Just checking out, see if I can find any health before I face the chief henchman of Hans. Hans is in that room with my wife, with a gun pressed against her head. I will try and get in there desperately with C4. I will fail, because you have to fight Hans's last goon. There's only one terrorist left apart from Hans, and he is down next to this pool here with a machine gun and his best white pyjamas that he's nicked from Bruce Willis. And there, I've killed him. Take that, you blighter. Just going to have a last look round. As you can see, I'm shuffling now because my feet are like I've been doing Christmas shopping all day in London, and I've been wearing the wrong type of shoes for it. So there we go. That door will now be open. I'll be able to take on Hans, and he's a bit of a bullet sponge because he's the last boss. Now, you can either shoot him, like I'm going to do, or you can reenact the film and you can shoot him and punch him off the side. And he, as you can see there, that's the window that's broken. And you can kill him that way. And there you go. There's John McClane with his big old fringe that he doesn't have in real life and never did. And this is enacting the bit where the policeman saves us from the heavily bloodied up hostage. And there you go. That's the end of the game. A game you should play. And I thank you for joining me on this Yuletide adventure. It's been a pleasure of mine to show you this game if you've never seen it before. And if you have seen it before...
Well, thanks for sitting through that. That was some time out of your day, and I do appreciate you doing that for me. Now, if you wouldn't mind, can you go and get me a Mars bar from the 24-hour garage? I'm Hank Marvin. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Like, subscribe, and thanks, bye.